The lawsuits, the land, and the rumors, no one saw coming. The night is scarily quiet. Suddenly, an emergency radio crackles through the darkness, followed by blue lights flashing between the tall trees. A ranger walks slowly down a dirt road, his flashlight shining into the woods that most people would never go into. Just 1 minute ago, Eustace Conway finally spoke up. And what he told us about the lawsuits, the investigations, and the land he almost lost changes everything you thought you knew about mountain men. Old newspaper clippings flash on the screen, zoning threats, county papers, angry letters from neighbors. A map appears showing Turtle Island Preserve, its borders outlined in bright white. The same borders that caused years of fights. Rumors spread like wildfire. Property lines argued over by angry neighbors. Claims that Eustace's unusual buildings broke the rules. Hikers who disappeared miles from his land. Yet somehow the internet still blamed Turtle Island. These stories were never proven, never connected to Eustace. But they spread anyway, passed along by gossip, fear, and online guessing games. In today's world, truth moves slowly, but rumors race ahead. Images of social media posts, blurry pictures, clickbait thumbnails, and small-town gossip flash by like a spreading fire. Every rumor adds more fuel. Every exaggeration becomes another heavy weight on his shoulders. And then silence. Blue lights fade away. The woods go dark again. Wind moves through the trees like a warning sign. He didn't walk away from mountain men because he wanted to disappear from TV. He left because the life he fought to protect was being threatened from every side. A final moment, cold, still, heavy. And tonight, you'll hear the moment Eustace finally admitted why he had no choice but to leave. Eustace Conway's story didn't start with fame or cameras or fights. It began in the quiet corners of the American wilderness long before the world ever knew his name. As a kid, while most children spent summers in air-conditioned rooms, Eustace was learning to sleep under the stars. At 12 years old, he built his first basic shelter. No building plans, no power tools, just instinct and determination. By his teenage years, he was riding horses across entire states, guided only by the sun, the wind, and the ground beneath him. His life was never about being a rebel. It was about being in tune with nature, with simplicity, with the old ways that modern society had forgotten. Turtle Island Preserve became the crown jewel of his vision. Hundreds of acres of raw, living wilderness where people could touch the past with their own hands. Visitors learned to build fires without matches, make tools from stone, and see the world without the noise of engines, clocks, or screens. To Eustace, Turtle Island wasn't a business. It was a safe place, somewhere he could teach, protect, and preserve a culture disappearing faster every year. But even as he chose solitude, the outside world kept pushing closer, curious, doubtful, and often confused by the idea of a man choosing to live outside the rules everyone else followed. He wasn't trying to be different. He simply was the last American frontiersman living in a modern age that didn't know what to do with him. When mountain men first contacted Eustace, the idea sounded harmless. Show the world how he lived. Teach forgotten skills. Inspire others to reconnect with nature. But with fame came a new kind of invasion, one Eustace was never ready for. At first it was small, a few fans driving up the long gravel road just to see where he lived. Then more came. Some stayed too long. Some wandered onto trails they didn't understand. Others stepped past warning signs, treating Turtle Island like a public attraction instead of a delicate preserve. People treated his home like a national park, a filming spot, a background for their selfies. Fame, he would later admit, was a visitor that didn't know how to leave. Filming brought its own problems. Crews needed lighting, staging movement drama. But Eustace didn't stage anything. He didn't rehearse, didn't perform, didn't play for the camera. His life was real, and real life doesn't care about TV schedules. While the crew filmed, projects stopped. Classes were interrupted. Animals needed care. Storms rolled in. Responsibilities doubled. Fans showed up without warning. Cars blocked paths meant for horses. Tourists wandered into dangerous places. The quiet he once relied on became a luxury he could no longer have. For a man who wanted solitude, fame became something else entirely, a hunter that followed every step, waited at every edge, and demanded more every season. The first real battles didn't start with fans or fame. They started with the county office. One morning, inspectors showed up with clipboards, cameras, and a pile of paperwork. They weren't there to learn or appreciate his way of living. They were there to measure it, judge it, and control it. They questioned the buildings he'd made by hand. They looked closely at the timber structures made from fallen trees. They asked whether his traditional methods met modern building codes. To Eustace, these weren't simple rule-following questions. They were threats. Every inspection felt like the world telling him he was wrong for living differently. Zoning officials pointed to lines on maps. Neighbors filed complaints about boundaries and property use. Some claimed his cabins weren't up to standard. Others said Turtle Island was growing too fast or bringing too many visitors. Every letter from the county cut like a knife. Every demand for upgrades felt like an attempt to erase the old ways he fought to preserve. His buildings weren't rule-breaking. They were classrooms. His shelters weren't unsafe. They were built stronger than most modern homes. But the system didn't care about tradition, only procedures. The fights grew louder. The pressure increased. At times, Eustace was forced to stop classes, cancel events, and redirect all his energy into meetings, hearings, and negotiations that dragged on for months. To the outside world, it was just paperwork. To Eustace, it was the beginning of a war over the soul of Turtle Island. The legal battles didn't come as one single hit. They came as a slow, grinding storm. At first, Eustace believed the fights would settle themselves, that common sense would win, that officials would recognize Turtle Island as a place of learning, not a business to pick apart. But months turned into years, and each passing season brought more paperwork, more hearings, more demands that pulled him away from the very land he was fighting to protect. There were days when classes had to be stopped because inspectors showed up without warning. Days when volunteers arrived eager to help, only to find Eustace sitting at a table covered in papers instead of guiding them through the forest. Nights when he returned to the cabin exhausted, not from work, but from arguing definitions, codes, and regulations with people who didn't understand his way of life. The county shutdown order hit hardest. In a single moment, Turtle Island, his living classroom, his life's purpose, was declared non-compliant. Students couldn't come. Programs were canceled. Donations slowed. Bills didn't. The preserve felt strangely quiet, as if even the woods sensed the tension hanging in the air. He hired lawyers, though the idea of paying someone to explain his lifestyle to a courtroom felt ridiculous. The legal fees stacked higher than any wood pile he'd ever built. And still, he refused to compromise the soul of Turtle Island. He would bring things to code where possible, but he would not turn his sanctuary into a government checklist. Every document, every motion, every signature pulled him further from a forest and deeper into a world he never wanted to enter. It wasn't the physical work breaking him. It was the emotional cost of defending something that should never have needed defending. In his words, "I was spending more time in courtrooms than in the woods. That's when I knew something had to change." As the legal storm swirled, another shadow began, creeping toward Turtle Island. One born from whispers, guessing, and the dangerous power of rumor. In the mountains surrounding the preserve, hikers occasionally became lost, injured, or confused. It happened for decades before Eustace ever arrived there. Rough terrain, sudden storms. That was the reality of wilderness. But reality didn't matter online. Whenever someone went missing anywhere within miles of his land, internet detectives, blog writers, and rumor-hungry locals sometimes dragged Turtle Island's name into the conversation. A few twisted the stories, claiming connections that didn't exist. Some confused the region's general wilderness with his actual preserve. Others simply used his fame from mountain men to fuel dramatic theories. Eustace was never accused of wrongdoing, not once. Yet the rumors created an atmosphere he never asked for. Increased patrols, unexpected knocks on his door, helicopters flying over the ridges, and strangers showing up asking questions that made no sense. Worst of all were the unannounced search parties, well-meaning but misguided. They walked onto his land during active classes, scaring visitors and disrupting the peaceful quiet he worked so hard to maintain. They weren't looking for trouble, but trouble always followed when fear took control. Eustace could feel the pressure tightening. It wasn't anger he felt. It was sadness. Sadness that his home, his sanctuary, was becoming a target for suspicion simply because it was remote, silent, and easy to blame. When people vanish in the wilderness, he once said, the nearest landmark becomes the first suspect. Even when the truth cleared the air, the damage stayed. Rumors once born rarely die. While the lawsuits and rumors swirled outside Turtle Island, a different kind of pressure was building inside it. One that came from the very show that introduced Eustace to millions of viewers. At first, the partnership with Mountain Men felt natural. They wanted authenticity. He lived authenticity. But as the seasons passed, the line between storytelling and real life began to blur. Filming schedules clashed with daily responsibilities. Crews wanted moments of tension, conflict, and triumph, all captured within tight production windows. But the wilderness doesn't work on a schedule. Sometimes a task that looked simple on camera required days of preparation. Other times, the weather changed, animals needed care, or students depended on him. Real life wasn't dramatic enough for TV, and TV wasn't patient enough for real life. Small disagreements appeared. Producers pushed for bigger moments. Eustace pushed back, wanting honesty over show. Scenes were delayed. Tempers flared. The crew sometimes grew frustrated when Eustace prioritized actual emergencies, a broken fence, an injured animal, a sudden storm, over planned shots. Then came the tiredness, the constant presence of cameras, the sense that every action needed to be explained, justified, or performed for an audience he never asked for. He wasn't angry at the crew. Many of them respected him deeply. But the weight of performing while maintaining a preserve grew heavier every year. Visitors interrupted takes. Tourists wandered into scenes. Helicopters from search teams buzzed overhead. Inspectors arrived during filming. Everything crashed together. The tension wasn't explosive. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, quiet erosion, the kind that wears down mountains over time. Eustace didn't blame the show, but he could feel it pulling him away from the life he was trying to protect. There wasn't one single disaster that broke Eustace Conway. It was a slow build-up of moments, frustrations, and invasions that finally pushed him past his limits. The breaking point came quietly, disguised as an ordinary day. It began with legal threats waiting in his mailbox, a new notice, more demands, more deadlines. Before he could even process it, a county inspector's truck rolled down the gravel path, arriving unannounced, clipboard in hand. He was in the middle of teaching a class, guiding students through fire-making techniques, when he saw the vehicle pulling up. The students watched as he tried to balance two worlds, one rooted in ancient wisdom, the other suffocating him with red tape. The inspector wanted immediate access to structures, water systems, and paperwork he hadn't even had time to complete because filming had swallowed his week. Then the cameras arrived demanding shots for the day's schedule, tasks staged at the worst possible time. A crew member asked for a repeat take of a scene where Eustace chopped wood, even though a real emergency needed his attention. A fence had collapsed in the night, and animals needed securing before they wandered onto the road. As he tended to the fence, he caught sight of strangers standing beyond the tree line, fans who had slipped onto the property, hoping for pictures. Unaware of the danger, they ignored signs, ignored boundaries, and ignored his requests to stay back. Everything crashed together in a single hour. The inspector's questions, the fans' intrusion, the crew's pressure, the paperwork piling up, the fragile classes disrupted once again. He later described that day with one sentence: